Welcome to Moving Conversations, a podcast for movement professionals by movement professionals. If you coach, train, or teach movement, Pilates, or fitness, then this podcast is for you. With more than 60 years of experience in fitness and Pilates, your hosts Brian Ritchie and Nora St. John explore the science of human movement, diving deep into the facts, myths, and common misconceptions, hoping to spark thought and conversation about how we view fitness and movement. Now, let's jump into Moving Conversations. Welcome back to Moving Conversations. I'm Brian Ritchie. Joining me as always is Nora St. John. Good morning, Nora. How's it on the West Coast doing?
It's a little foggy, but not too bad. How about you? I hear you just had a little bit of excitement in the snow yesterday.
Oh my gosh, we got quite a bit of snow. Nothing like they did. I mean, I was watching some of the football games and they had a ton of snow. We had nothing like that. But this is the first snow that DC has seen in well over 2 years. So let's just say everybody forgot what to do. So yes. it was a little bit of harrowing experiences, but you know, we survived and the kids had a lot of fun in the snow and everything. And they say it's going to be a wet winter. So we shall see. We shall see. Today, we are going to add on to what we talked about last week. Last week, we discussed weight loss drugs. And I thought, what a perfect way for us to dive into how to train and how to program for the overweight or the obese client. Because I figure there's a lot of people that ask these questions. And when I teach this class, it's probably one of the most popular classes that I teach because everybody wants to know, what should I do? How should I program? Are there things we need to know? And there's a lot that we need to know about. So I thought, let's dive into it and see where we go.
That sounds great. I think it's such a topic. I mean, I think I was reading something the other day and it said the average American woman, like normal, is a size 18 now. That's kind of average.
Wow. I had no idea.
So yeah, so people are just bigger than they used to be. And certainly that awareness has come into the fitness world and the Pilates world, honestly, in a great way.
Yeah.
Because for so long, it's like everybody who does Pilates has to be skinny. That's like a prerequisite. And that really leaves people out who can really benefit from the work. Mm-hmm. So I've been really excited just to see more people of different body sizes pushing their way into fitness and really making their needs known. And I think it's just a super important topic.
Yeah, it's interesting. You and I spent some time in Asia. And when I was there last time, I was talking about obesity, not to the crowd, but just to a few people. And they said, what's interesting is that the only people you see at gyms are people who are already in shape in general.
Yeah, exactly.
They need to be in shape in order to go to a gym. They need to be fit. Mm-hmm. They need to be skinny. And those are the ones that go to the gym. And I'm thinking, wait, that's backwards. They should be there. They need to for health reasons, but it's the other people. And they say, no, you wouldn't do that if you were overweight because it's too embarrassing. And there's a lot of stigma there. And we saw a lot of that even here in the United States a few years ago, where people would I heard people say, yeah, I got to get in shape before I go join a gym.
Right.
And I thought, no, that's where you go to get in shape.
That's why you go to the gym.
Exactly.
It's not something you do after you've gone to the gym. It's something you do. Yes, exactly. You do to go to the gym. You do to do the gym because of that.
Exactly. So I think we've broken down that stereotype, and there are a lot more gyms like a Planet Fitness, which is focusing much more on inclusivity and getting people of all, shapes, sizes, of every, gender and race and everything else. Everyone's invited, and that's great. There are some negatives. I had a coworker, someone who worked for me, who was a former football player, big guy. But, over the years, you eat too much, you get a little out of shape and things. He was like, I need to do some working out and get back into shape. And he wanted to go to join Planet Fitness. And they said, we're sorry, but you're too big and you're going to make people feel uncomfortable here.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't that he was overweight. It's just he was tall. He looked like a former football player. So it's interesting that there was that reverse as well. That there's, you're out of shape, so you can't go to this gym, but you're too in shape, so you can't go to this gym. So it was very interesting, just sort of that reverse stereotype.
Yeah, that's just all just like straight discrimination.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like, you can't. it's hard for businesses to actually say you can't come into my business. And I know they have the right to refuse service to anybody, but really that's crazy.
Yeah. So I found that interesting. I found that interesting. So when we're talking about overweight and obesity, let's first give a couple of definitions of what it is to me to be overweight or obese. Technically, we refer to things in BMI. Now, you and I both know there's a lot of limitations with body mass index. Michael Jordan at his peak was considered obese because of how much muscle he had. Karl Malone, same thing. They had a ton of muscle. They had almost no body fat, but because of their size, they were still, overweight or obese. But it's something that's easily measured, and it's something we can use in science because it's easily measured, and there's no variable besides, someone's height and weight.
Yeah.
So, it's an easy way to sort of calibrate that. So anything between 25 to 30 is considered overweight. And 30 plus is considered obese. And now they've actually called anything above 35 to be what they refer to as super obese. That's something that I've seen in some of the literature now. So in general, though, when we talk about body fat, we're talking about anything for men over about 25% and women over about 32% would be more in the obese category. So, yeah, so I find that we're seeing a lot more people. I heard at one point that over a third of Americans were technically obese. And I thought that seemed awfully high until you really look around and realize, like you just said, if a size 18 is the average size for a woman, then really that really goes to show that it is. Most people probably are, in the overweight category.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly, you and I both spend time in Asia, and you spend time here and you spend time in Asia, and it's like, no, you see many, many, many bigger bodies here.
A lot more.
Just of all kinds, all sexes, all races, etc. But just, people are just bigger here than they are in other places.
And do you think that's because beauty standards? When I was in Korea at one point, I was with someone a friend and colleague who does a lot of work with pregnancy and things. And she clued me in on a lot of things about when women have babies in Korea, what's expected, what the husband expects, and how quickly the wife needs to get back to the former size and all of this sort of thing. And it's ridiculous. But beauty standards there are really pretty hardcore, that they need to be a certain size and as thin as possible. And they don't want to be muscular. They want to be, very, very thin. Do you think that there's a lot more shame that happens there, that people are, embarrassed to be overweight? I don't know. I'm asking. You've spent a lot more time in Asia than I have.
I don't know how much of it is genetic predisposition.
Sure.
Right, that they're just more inclined to be leaner. Whether it is a very different relationship to food, that it is for sure. There's a different relationship to food in all of Asia than there is here. The diet's quite different in all those places.
Yeah.
It's huge. There may be processed food, and more of that's coming in. More sugar and stuff is coming in than was there. So there's also, a history of we've had a longer time with processed food and sugary drinks and that kind of thing than a lot of Asia has. It's really like the 20 and 30 somethings that have adopted that kind of lifestyle. Most of their parents, especially if I think about just the history of China or the history of Korea, there was not excess food for a long time, for hundreds of years, unless you were of a certain class. So it's just a very, very different relationship to food is what I see too.
I think you're right. And now that I think about it, I think you're absolutely right. There is a very different amount of processed foods and a lot of but you are right. I see it a lot more. There's a lot more sugary drinks and things like that are coming up. I remember the place that we stay in Seoul, in Gangnam. Downstairs was a McDonald's. And don't ask me why. One day I was just hankering for some food that seemed, familiar. So I went in. I have to say that I saw probably 4 people in front of me order ice cream, the soft serve ice cream, and that's all they ordered. And I was thinking, wow, here you rarely see that unless it's a kid. But there, we're talking about these were people in suits, who obviously had just come from their office jobs, and that's what they wanted. They wanted the sugary sweet. So it was interesting that I thought, oh, wow. And you hear and watch people, they have a lot more sugary drinks and things, the younger people especially. So I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think that introduction into Asia is going to possibly be changing what we see in the next, 50 years there. Interesting.
I'd imagine. So here though, there are many reasons for the obesity epidemic, as people call it.
Yep.
What are the key factors that you see, Brian?
Well, the big one is going to be overeating, obviously. And when it comes to overeating, about 60% of people, the law of thermodynamics does work. Calories in equals calories out. If you consume more calories than you burn off, you're going to gain weight. If you burn more calories than you consume, you're going to lose weight. But I do say that's only in about 60% of people, because I can't tell you how many people, and myself included, I mentioned last week that at one point when I graduated high school, I was over 420 pounds, and I've been fighting with weight all my life. And while I'm 190 pounds now, I really have to watch everything I do, and mine was metabolic issues and whatnot. But for a lot of people out there, there's something going on internally that doesn't lend itself to that calories in equals calories out. They can starve themselves all they want. They hit a set point, and then they're stuck. They're stuck on that plateau of losing 10 pounds, even though they have another 50 to lose. And as soon as they go off the diet, they gain 20 back instead of that 10. And then their set point adjusts even higher.
One thing that I want to really point out strongly, and a lot of this comes up in our studios and when I talk to instructors and when I talk to clients, is this bias, this feeling like if you were just a good enough person, if you just had the willpower, you could change it. And that's typically, in my experience, coming from somebody who has never struggled much with weight.
Yes.
It's like I talk to a lot of my friends. I know I'm one of them. It's like I go up 10 pounds, I go down 10 pounds. That's it.
Yep.
I think for me to gain a lot more than that, I would have to work really hard to gain a lot more than that, or to lose a lot more than that. And that's absolutely my genetics. That's just how I'm built.
Yep.
And my husband, much like you, he looks at food and he gains weight.
Yeah.
He changes his diet radically and he loses some weight, and then he gets to a certain point, which is still technically overweight. And that's a floor that is hard to get through.
Yeah.
And it's certainly hard to get through on just pure will and changing of physical habits.
What's interesting is we did talk about weight loss drugs last week. I just read an article that the information just came out that showed that it was all about when people stop taking these weight loss drugs, what happens.
Yeah.
And what was really interesting is that even those who take the drugs, there's a metabolic set point that most people have. That's sort of a hard line. And we've seen that in bariatric surgery, with weight loss drugs, with diet and exercise, with everything, that people can't seem to get below. And everybody's is different. And when they hit it, their body is like, okay, I'm fine. But when they're at a certain point, like for me, I knew I had a number of set points. I had a set point around 285. I had a set point at 240. I had one at 213, and you'd think 213, that's a weird number, but I couldn't get under it. But once I got to it, I could stay there for a while, and it was like my body was okay. And it's sort of like it mellowed out, and I was like, oh, okay, this is where we're fine for a while. And then all of a sudden, before I know it, I'm 222. And then it's like a downhill spiral. All of a sudden, I'm back up to 240, and then that's my hard, set point. So it was really interesting that there was a number of them and a number of plateaus that you sort of hit and you stick, and it's hard to get past. And again, it doesn't just mean you have to starve yourself more, because for some people, it is just their genetics. And there's a lot of factors that go into this. I mean, age, gender, hormones. I mean, how many of us know of pre and postmenopausal women who come to us and they cannot, no matter what, they said, I've always been thin, and now I've got this extra 25 pounds that I don't know what's going on. I cannot, no matter how much I diet, get rid of it. And I'm like, well, you've got all three. You've got your female, your hormones are changing.
And you're of a certain age.
And you're of a certain age.
And there you go. Yeah.
And those are huge variables that cause a lot of people to hold on to that. And so I want to make sure that everybody understands that calories in does not always equal calories out. And I think you said it yourself. There is a stigma. There is an absolute stigma out there that someone looks at someone who's overweight and immediately thinks they have poor willpower. They're sloppy. I've said this in many of my classes, that smoking and obesity are two things that people can openly discriminate against, and no one seems to have an issue with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and I find myself
Absolutely.
doing that with smokers.
Yeah.
I'll be honest. I see one and I immediately have in my head, I'm already thinking because, you know, I grew up with a parent who smoked and I just have this visceral reaction. But I also know that people look at obese people the exact same way.
Yep. Immediate judgment.
Immediate.
And lack of compassion.
Lack of compassion. You obviously don't have any willpower. You obviously, you know, aren't trying hard. And I've had clients who literally have sat across from me at the desk who said, "Look, I really want to work with you, but I don't know if I should because you're so fat." And I'm like, "Well, I've got some metabolic things that I'm dealing with." And then I tell them how much I work out and how much I'm doing, and they go, "Oh." And I said, "Look, according to the doctor, I'm one of the fittest people they've ever met. My blood work is awesome and off the charts. I'm just in a bigger body than I'd like to be." I said, "Don't think I'm not trying." And that's something that I really want to get through is have compassion. You don't know what journey these people are on when you meet them, when you see them. You don't know how hard they've been working.
No.
You know? So that's just something to keep in mind. Other things that come out, psychological reasons. You know, depression, anxiety, stress, all release things like the catecholamines, adrenaline, too much cortisol can cause our bodies to have that fight or flight reflex. But if it's having it too much, there's too much stress involved, suddenly our bodies are freaking out and we're going to want to hold on to more body fat. These are just things that, you know, and especially adipose tissue around the midsection.
Yep.
You
Our
know?
body seems to think that protects us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
mentioning protection, armor against others. I had a woman who came into me, one of the sweetest women you'd ever want to meet. She was probably mid 350, 400 pound range. She would never get near a scale. And she said, and she understood what was going on. She knew the psychological traumas of her life. And she said, "If you ever talk to me about my weight, I will never come back."
Yeah.
She said, "If you ever see me losing weight, don't ever comment on it because I will sabotage it."
Yeah.
She said, "I know it's armor. I know it keeps people away. I don't like it, but I know it's there." So this is someone who obviously had done the work and understood that.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people out there who don't understand that and don't realize that that is something that might be going on, you know, with them.
And that's, I've worked a lot with trying to just break down biases in instructors generally. I find for me, the bias about weight is the hardest one for instructors to just get over. It's like, you have no idea what that person is doing. And over time, you may understand better what their actual situation is. But certainly when somebody walks in, you have no idea what's going on. They could have just had a really traumatic pregnancy. They could be 2 months postpartum. You have no idea, like, until you sit down and talk to them and sort of get the story. But that can take a long time. And one of the things that I really want to encourage is many people who come in who maybe are not happy with their body for whatever reason, if they've got too much weight or whatever, rather than really looking at it was, well, when you are in a different body, we will do this, which I think people do all the time, including clients. Clients are often like, well, I'm not going to do that until
Right.
I've lost the weight or I've done this or I've done that. And instead it's more like, okay, let's deal with you right now. I have no idea if you're going to lose or gain weight. Like, I really have no idea. Really, maybe you do, maybe you don't. I don't know. Let's deal with you absolutely where you are right now. Let's meet you here and do the best we can to get you as fit and as strong and as comfortable in your body as we can.
Yeah. And I think something to keep in mind is, remember that obesity is a disease for a lot of people.
Yes.
And if we treat it as a disease like alcoholism, you're not going to see someone who's an alcoholic and immediately start putting them down and start saying things behind their back and all of this, because you don't know the battle that they've been through. You don't know, but there's not the same stigma because they've recovered, you give them a congratulations. You're like high-fiving them. They're doing awesome, and you want to help. Yet for obesity, you don't get that same type of support system.
Or you get it in the sense of, oh, you look so great. Have you lost weight?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, that which is always like, you didn't look good before.
Right.
Right? Right? Like the implied thing is, oh, you look so much better now because you've lost weight, which, anybody who's ever gained or lost weight has experienced that. Well-meaning people trying to make you feel good, but kind of end up making you feel crappy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, oh, did I look like crap before or what?
Yeah. Speaking of diseases, keep in mind that there are some diseases that cause people to gain weight. There's hypothyroidism. We all know people who are on thyroid medication or whatnot, and that can, if your thyroid's out of whack, it can definitely have you holding on to more weight. Polycystic ovarian syndrome is one of those that, it does a lot of things. It's a hormonal imbalance that creates these tiny little cysts, but it also is linked strongly to insulin resistance. So when something like Ozempic makes you produce more insulin to help you with your blood sugar, this does actually the opposite for these people. So they're not producing enough. They become very, their body can't deal with the carbohydrates they're putting in. Their blood sugar stays elevated a lot longer. So there's a lot of that sort of thing. Cushing syndrome, which is the adrenal glands are just producing way too much cortisol. And just insulin resistance syndrome in general. A lot of people have that, where their bodies don't respond to carbohydrates the way it should.
Right. They take them and go, okay, good, more fuel. I'm going to hold on to this.
Yeah.
They put it in the tank.
Put it in the tank.
They put it in the bank, put it in the savings account, as opposed to burning it.
Exactly. And with diseases, something to keep in mind too is there are a lot of medications that people can be taking that can cause weight gain. A lot of the depression medications. A lot of them can cause the SSRIs, serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Those ones, a lot of those can cause weight gain. There's ones, I have someone who is a cancer survivor, breast cancer survivor. She's on tamoxifen. She's put on a lot of weight because of that. And she's never really had an issue before. And now she says, I feel like I'm in someone else's body. But I got to stay on this for a certain length of time or else the cancer may come back. Amitriptyline, beta blockers. Beta blockers will slow the heart rate. So then your metabolism does tend to be a little bit more sluggish. Birth control for some people. Cortisone, or prednisone, Steroids. All of these can have an effect. So anytime you take any drug, you have to really understand that it could cause, especially long term. We have clients who are on prednisone for years. Not only does it cause problems to the bones, but they gain a lot of weight a lot of times. So these are things to think about as well. And it's not something that we as, trainers and things, we are not medical professionals in that sense that we can, prescribe drugs or tell someone to get off of them. That's between them and their doctor. That's not our job.
Yeah, no. One other thing I want to bring up, Ryan, because you brought it up a little earlier, but I want to just bring it up, is people can definitely be overweight or obese and fit in the sense of cardiovascular health, in terms of muscular strength, in terms of endurance. It's like my husband, who clearly has been overweight for years, he rode 4,500 miles this year.
Yeah.
On his bicycle, right? And he's got great numbers and everything looks good. His lipids and everything are great. But people would look at him and just go, oh, you're fat. You're clearly not healthy. And that's not true. And that's one of those biases that, you look at someone, you don't know.
Yep.
You can look at somebody, one of the people I know with the highest cholesterol I've ever known was like stick thin.
I had the same thing.
Her numbers were like 350. She was a cholesterol building monster.
Yep.
And not a lot of fat on her, but just, her body just made cholesterol. That's what it did.
Yep.
And you wouldn't know that from the outside. So, and for her, it was a real health issue. And
same thing with diabetes and blood sugar numbers. I had a gentleman in here who was 120 pounds. He was tiny. He was probably 5'5", 5'6", but he was 120 pounds. Yet his A1C, he was diabetic. And it was type 2. It was definitely, insulin related. He just, and it was funny because the doctor said, well, do you drink a lot of soda? No. Do you do that? Do you eat sugar? No, no, no. What did he do every day for lunch? He had donuts.
Oh, well, there you go.
And when he said that, I was like, well, yeah. And that was just normal for him. He goes, oh, I guess I shouldn't be doing that. But his body held on to that blood sugar differently.
Yeah.
And so he had to fight it even though he was 120 pounds. So again, just because someone is thin doesn't mean that they're in great shape, just as though someone who might be overweight. And I notice I don't like to use the term fat. I don't. If someone's overweight, that's fine. They have more weight on their bodies than they would like and may be healthy for them. However, you can be perfectly fit. You can be in great shape. If your numbers, if someone does all your blood work and things and your numbers are fantastic and you're cardiovascularly fit and you can run rings around people, you're in great shape. You just may not be in the body that you desire.
Right. And that's a really important thing to make a distinction of. Just because somebody is overweight does not mean that they're not in shape.
Yeah.
So a couple of things that I wanted to make sure we bring up is, and this is specifically for the trainers in the audience or even the clients in the audience, is two things. One, I think it's really important to try to make the environment as safe as possible.
Yes.
And number two is things to be aware of when you're dealing with clients who are larger than other clients.
Yep.
Because sometimes you have to make accommodations in terms of equipment or how you deal with things or whatever. So I kind of want to get into those two topics as well on this conversation.
Absolutely. No, we're going to get into that and we can jump in right now. When you're working with a client like this, there are some things that you really have to sort of keep in the forefront of your mind. Okay. And I say safety is always first. And when I say safety, I'm going to say two things. Number one, psychological, and number two, physical. So emotional and
order.
physical. Yeah.
Yeah.
When someone comes to a gym, the hardest step they make is walking through that door.
Yeah.
And if they're embarrassed, if they're 200 pounds overweight or even 10 pounds overweight, in their mind, they don't look the way they should. But if someone really has a lot of weight to lose, a couple 100 pounds overweight, they are scared to death. And remember that as the trainer or as a Pilates instructor, chances are you've got the body that they would love and they are intimidated beyond belief by you. So already they are on guard. You need to make them
defensive and probably scared.
You need to make them feel safe. You need to make them feel safe emotionally. I remember I almost came to blows with a trainer at one of the clubs. I quit because of this incident, but I was, just doing my cardio. And this is when I had, probably another 50 pounds on me right now. But I saw someone who was first of the year right around this time. And there was someone who obviously was probably in the 300, 350 pound range and was working with a trainer. And the trainer was making them do things that I would have found embarrassing, walking, doing farmers walks around the gym and trying to do walking lunges when they couldn't even squat properly and just things that would have made me uncomfortable. And afterward, and first of all, those are exercise choices. We're going to get into programming in a second, but those are exercise choices that the trainer made. I'm not going to judge that. What I did judge was what that trainer said afterwards. I heard him talking to another trainer and bad-mouthing this client and calling them names, not to their face, but behind their back. That was one of the few times that I felt physically, viscerally, I wanted to put someone through a wall. I was so angry. And I went to and I talked to the general manager. I knew I wasn't going to change his mind. But I talked to the general manager and I said, this cannot happen. You have to create a safe space for these people to be in.
Yeah.
They're already feeling embarrassed. So by doing things out in the open where might make them even more self-conscious, maybe not the greatest idea in the world. So like I say, emotionally, they need to feel safe. The other thing is go ahead. No, please.
No, just one thing I want to add there is because in a Pilates studio, it's often women, right? It's often a lot of women. And one of the things that women really bond around is how much they hate their bodies. There's always this like, oh, I really wish I could lose 5 pounds. I don't like my thighs, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of hatred, really, of their bodies that comes out a lot. And women kind of bond around that and just sort of a thing around that.
Sure.
And, in my studio, I really discouraged that profoundly anyway. I was like, we're not going to talk, and I would be pretty blunt. It's like, ladies, we're not going to talk about how we hate ourselves. It's just not okay. Let's go on. Right? I really would be that blunt. Because what I would find was, the three ladies talking about that, let's say I've got a reformer class, right, or over here, they're all a lesser body weight, right, whatever that is, and they're complaining. And I've got three people over here who are quite overweight, and it's like that creates a really screwed up environment because then nobody feels safe, right? And so a lot of it for me too is making sure that it's not just the trainers, but it's also the clients, that the atmosphere that the clients are embodying and are part of also is safe. It's like the idea that trainer would then go badmouth this client to another trainer in front of other clients.
Yes.
Right. Creates a tremendously negative, toxic atmosphere.
Yes. 100%.
Right. I mean, the fact that you hurt them, it's one thing if they're in the locker room and if they're having drinks by themselves or whatever, that you can't do anything about that.
Yep.
But within that space, you have to hold certain priorities in terms of kindness and compassion and sensitivity.
Yes. And my thing is empathy.
Yeah.
We all look around you. Everyone's got their own battles.
Yep.
Everyone's got it. You don't know what they've done to get here. You don't know how hard they've battled. You have no idea what they've done. And you know what? You got to respect them for that. So having the empathy and keeping the space safe for them emotionally so that they feel comfortable. So for me, I would often take them into a part of the space when I worked at a larger gym where there weren't as many people so that they did feel a little bit safer. The other thing to think about, and you and I talked about this before we started recording today, is that not every piece of equipment is made for every person. And what I say about that is, I've said last week I consult and work for the National Center for Weight and Wellness, and I've worked with people over 600 pounds. And a lot of people, I'll put a massage table out and have them do some of their exercises on that because they can't get up and down off the ground. But at the same time, I also know the weight limit of all my equipment. And I said, look, we got to have a stronger table here because the last thing I want is someone to try and get on the table and have the table break.
Exactly.
And if you're looking at a lot of pieces of equipment, even if you just look at machinery, I mean, we used to joke that machines were only made for men because they were made for people about 5'8". So if you were 5'0", you couldn't use the machine anyway.
Right.
But it's also made for a smaller person physically that you put them in it. And if they're very rotund, like let's just think of a chest press machine, they may not even fit in the machine.
Right.
Leg press machine. Their range of motion may be 5 inches because their stomach and thighs are too close and they're hitting each other. You need to be aware of your surroundings and know the equipment and not choose pieces that might embarrass them because they can't get in and out of. I'm thinking of the reformer. I'm thinking of our shuttle. Getting up and down out of it might be embarrassing. But also trying to get them into something like a 45-degree leg press where they're having to push up and they're all the way down. And how are they going to get out of it? And, they feel like they're being crushed. And it's not fair to them. Right.
And one thing I want to bring up here, just because, again, many of you are Pilates teachers, is we had a situation at Balanced Body where one of our teachers in Nashville was working with a lot of larger women, 300 and up pounds. And what we discovered was they were breaking the axles or deforming the axles on the Allegro. She had, 14-inch Allegros. And so she brought this problem to us. She was like, hey, I work with, a lot of larger clients. And so at that point, we actually re-engineered a lot of our equipment to basically support somebody who's at least 400 pounds.
Nice.
And of course, there's always a level of safety, so it could probably get up to 500. But we re-engineered all of our equipment, taking that into account because we realized people were getting bigger. And then we also do a lot of work with sports teams, for example. If you're talking about a lineman, like a pro lineman, they are not small people.
Nope.
So we really looked at that in terms of just equipment design as well, that both designing it for the population and designing it for people who are larger.
Yeah. Yeah. And something that clients are always asking me about pieces of home equipment. Something to keep in mind is home equipment is rarely made strong enough for someone who is larger. And I say that thinking of treadmills, thinking of ellipticals, thinking of bicycles, the cardio equipment, which is what they want to have at home. Especially treadmills. I can't tell you how many times I've actually had someone who is 400, 450 pounds get on a treadmill and the belt stop moving because their weight is so heavy that when they step down, the motor isn't strong enough to continue to have the belt move.
And if you look at like, if you really dig into the details of a lot of equipment, it'll have a weight limit.
Absolutely.
And that weight limit is almost 250 pounds.
250 to 300
That's a
pounds.
really, really common weight lift.
Yep.
Yeah. The weight limit that I've seen on a lot of them. It's like, that isn't gonna manage some of the people that we see.
Especially in America. I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
The average guy, who has some weight to lose probably is close to the 225 to 250 range right there.
Right, off the bat.
Right. I remember when I was first decking out my home studio, when I trained people out of my home, I put almost all my money into my treadmill because I knew, okay, a bench is a bench is a bench. I don't need a super fancy one. I just need one strong enough. So I got a very strong one, but the treadmill I bought was Landis. Their light commercial model was rated, the motor was rated for, I believe, 450 pounds. So I said, okay, 9/10 of the people that I would ever see will be fine on this. And I never had a problem. The motor lasted forever.
Great.
So that's something to keep in mind if someone does ask you. You need to make sure you know the equipment that you're mentioning and don't tell them just to go down to Sears or go to the nearest fitness center and purchase, something off the rack. You need to make sure that they understand that they need to have a motor that's strong enough. Because even if it does turn the belt, it may be working too hard and you can burn the motor out.
Yeah, going to burn out. The thing too is it's not just true for stuff they're going to buy for their homes. It's also true of your equipment.
Absolutely.
So if you're in a gym or if you're in a Pilates studio, it's important that you know the weight limits of the equipment as well. So that you don't put somebody in an unsafe situation or stress the equipment in a way that's going to damage it over time. Right. So those are also things you just have to be aware of.
Absolutely. We use a high-low table for our stretching. And we also have and I made sure that it was a physical therapy table and it was a bariatric one, so it can handle more weight. But what I found is that mat tables, because some clients have a hard time getting up and down off the floor, and that's something else to think about. Someone who is overweight may have knee issues, may have a very difficult time getting up and down off the floor. So I've always had a table of some sort for them to use instead of getting up and down off the floor, especially for my elderly clients as well. What I found works the best, I found a used, it was crappy, but it works great, trap table.
Yes, that's the thing about a Pilates studio. Those trap tables,
solid.
They can handle. We've had 500-pound linebackers on those, basically. They're tough as nails. They're not going anywhere, and they're a good height. That 24 inches is a really nice height. People can get on it and off it easily, and you can work on them easily if you're doing any hands-on stuff. You're right at the level of working with them. Yeah, no, trap tables are fabulous.
Yep, I basically took all of the chrome off and just kept the table part because, again, it was a piece of junk. But the wood was solid, the upholstery was solid, the cushioning was still solid. I said, this is a mat table for me. And it has never given me a lick of problems. So keep that in mind. And it's solid wood, so it's not going to, break down. So keep those things in mind. And again, when you have people get up and down off the floor, you have to really be mindful, not only with our elderly people, but with people who are overweight. They may feel very uncomfortable getting up and down off the floor.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's something that, again, you want to keep them safe and feeling safe. So if you ask them immediately, our first session is usually an assessment. And if the first thing you ask them to do is get down on the floor and try and do a plank, well, chances are they don't have the strength for it anyway, but they're also going to get down on the floor. And I can tell you now that a 600 pounder that I was working with, I wasn't strong enough to get them off the ground.
Right.
I knew it.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
And I didn't want to embarrass myself by trying to get 4 or 5 people in there to try and help me, because that's going to make them feel horrible. So I made different choices. Obviously, that's why I like having tables for, clients to utilize for that. And it also just makes them feel good. I mean, I find that they just would rather be there than climbing up and down off the floor, whether they feel that it's cleaner or whatnot. They prefer it. Something else, when you're talking about programming, I'm going to warn people right now, if you're dealing with someone who has an extra 100 pounds or more, watch out for body weight exercises. Okay?
It's a whole different thing.
It's a different animal.
It's a whole different thing. Yes.
Even if you're doing something like a step up or a sitting down and standing up box squat, whatever you want to call it, for these people, doing 10 or 15 repetitions may gas them out, may be too difficult. That's one reason why I like my high-low table, is I can actually take that table up so high that they're barely having to do a squat. They're barely sitting down. Their knees only bend to 45 degrees, but it's taking them and at least getting them started with something. That's if I want to do any weight bearing. But I know a lot of trainers want to do things with the TRX, want to do lunges, want to do squats, want to do body weight exercises. And I have to tell you, it can be incredibly challenging for these people. First of all, their ligaments and tendons may not be ready. And we talked about the fascial system. That may not be ready to handle that kind of, let's put it frankly and say, abuse to the tissues.
Especially if they haven't been
doing anything.
Like if they've been working out, because like I've had people who are athletes, et cetera.
Exactly.
And they have that strength and stuff. But I have clients who are really deconditioned in that circumstance, or really never worked out. You start back at the baby steps.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. So I warn people, watch for the body weight exercises, get to those.
Yeah.
Because they're functional.
Yeah.
I love functional activities. And I just talked about doing a plank. That may be beyond them, but can we modify it to make it easier? So always look for
like
modifications.
A wall plank,
bingo.
Right, or an inverse plank, where basically your body weight is a lot higher up than your feet.
Yep.
Right, or even just, I've done modified just all fours little elbow bends, and things like that. So lots of ways to start to develop those skills without having to go straight for them. A couple of things that I'm cautious of, and I think about this particularly in terms of Pilates. So if I have somebody who has, a large abdomen, right? So big belly for whatever reason, there's some things that are really need to be modified.
Yes. One
One is their ability to flex the spine and do like a roll down, which again is a classic Pilates move, is often limited. It could just be really stiff. It could be with a lot of abdominal weight. Sometimes that really pulls that low back into a tight lordosis.
Yep.
So I've always got to be really careful with how I'm working with them in terms of any of the roll down exercises. I don't tend to do crunches. I tend to do things like on the trapeze table, a supported roll down, where they're holding on to the bar and they can roll back from about 90 and go back instead of coming up closer than that. Teasers, I don't do all those kinds of things. So I'm really aware of just that low back abdominal connection and being aware of any limitations in mobility there, because that's really common. The other thing too is hip flexion.
Yes.
If you've got a big belly, those legs can't come in very far because they hit your belly. Again, I watched my husband ride bicycles forever, and he looks like Charlie Chaplin a little bit on his bicycle because his legs are wide, because for so long his belly was really large, and he really couldn't get into enough hip flexion for cycling without his legs being slightly turned out.
Yep.
That's changing as he's changed shape a bit, but it's like those are things to be aware of. If I'm doing footwork on the reformer and they're in parallel, and I'm having them come in, typically we're only going to 90 anyway, if you're working with Pilates in that way, or they're on the chair. The chair can be great, but it's really hard in the chair not to be above 90 with your knees and to really, let that come in. So these are always things you think about. And, to Brian's point earlier, consider that before you put them in that situation.
Yes.
There's nothing worse than getting them getting them onto the chair, which is awkward enough for ordinary people, for somebody who's like, small size and not awkward with their body at all. And then suddenly they put their feet on the pedal, and either you don't have enough resistance on it, so the pedal falls to the floor, and or you really, they don't have the range of motion to bring those knees up very far. So these are just things to think about, before you put somebody in an awkward situation. It's going to make them embarrassed, make you feel uncomfortable, and really not create a safe environment for you or the client.
Something I'm going to clue everybody in on. If you ever have that situation where you put someone into a position where you realize really quick it's not going to work, especially someone who may be embarrassed because of it, whether it be for a physical reason or because they're overweight or whatnot. Number one, don't make a big deal of it. Don't be like, oh, you can't do this. Have them do whatever range of motion they can for a rep or two so you can see if it's even going to work at all. But then turn this into a positive and say, stop. I just had a better idea.
Exactly.
Let's go over here.
Always. Yeah. Hey, I'm not. Yeah. Let's do something. Oh, I got a much better idea. Exactly.
Yep. Don't make them wrong. Yeah.
No.
Because if you make them wrong, they feel bad.
Don't make it their fault.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. But if you say, oh, I just learned this new exercise. I think you're going to love it. And I've done that before and literally turned around and started walking to the other side of the gym, not knowing what the heck I'm going to do.
Absolutely. It's like, oh, that didn't work. Okay. Brain. Come on. Come up with something quickly here.
Yep. And usually let them walk as far away as possible. So you're just like, I have time to think. I have time to think as I get there.
Exactly. We're going to the other side of the studio.
Exactly. But again, I turn it into a positive. Turn it into a positive so that they think, oh, okay, cool. There's something different. Not, oh, you can't do this. Because again, I'm just going to reiterate, if physically they have a big belly and they can't necessarily flex, you're going to notice this during flexibility as well, trying to stretch them.
Yeah.
You may not be able to stretch their hamstrings enough for some people because their belly might be in the way. Or their quadriceps because their hamstrings may be too bulky and their calves may be too bulky that they're going to say, I don't even feel a stretch in my quads.
Right.
Just be aware that there are times when you're going to have bulk be in the way.
Exactly. And kind of, again, try to anticipate that.
Yes.
Picture the move, picture where the move's trying to go, and then decide whether that's appropriate.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these are just a couple of things, to focus in on to keep them safe. When you are doing core training, because we mentioned planks, I love any modification that we can do that's going to make it gentler on the body. And we see this with our seniors. You start them with a wall plank. And think of something else. I mean, think of our joints in general. At 190 pounds, if I do a push-up regularly for, let's say, 3 weeks, my wrists are eventually going to start feeling it a little bit just because there's a lot of flexion in there. Okay, if I started doing them on a daily basis or whatever. My muscles can handle it, but my wrists may not like it. Now, you put another 100 pounds on me, do you think my wrists are going to like that? Even if they could hold the position of a full arm plank, their wrists may not like it. So you have to keep in mind some of those smaller things when you're thinking about your core training. Whereas doing it off of a table where you're elevated could still give them enough stimulation for their core and is still a functional activity, but it's a modification where they're going to feel it, but they may not have any orthopedic considerations or as many, to watch out for.
One other thing that I want to bring up, because this was true with several of my larger clients, my larger women clients, is there can be a relationship between excess body fat and excess estrogen. Those often go together. And so some of my clients that were on the larger side were also hypermobile.
Yeah.
That is not a good combination.
Yep.
Right? Because you have extra weight coming down onto joints that are not particularly stable. They're more inclined to knee and hip issues, particularly. Those two things are very vulnerable in that situation. So I was always really careful with them. And I would basically go, okay, so let's really work on stability for you. I'd work on stability like mad, just basic hip strength, knee strength, however I could do it. I would do an awful lot of stabilizing and strengthening for them. And that really, really helped to keep their knees happier, to keep their hips happier, and to decrease the wear and tear that is going to happen when you have, more weight on you than your joints are quite ready for.
Yeah. this past year, I taught a course on core training versus spinal stability. And one of the things that a term that I came up with was you can do core work that's incidental core work, where it's a byproduct.
Absolutely.
Unilateral. Yep. Put a band on a wall and have them do a chest press with one arm. Suddenly they're having to resist that torque, and guess what? Their core's engaged. Change the position of the feet, wide, narrow, staggered, all of these things when they're doing it, and suddenly their core is being activated in a way that is very functional.
Yeah.
And a way that's going to be safe for them.
I was playing with that, very, very simply for a bunch of clients, but some of my older clients particularly, who are not like, they really don't, they can't flex very well, and they don't get the strength from that. So basically taking like hand weights, in this case, it was just 3-pound hand weights, small little footballs or hand weights, whatever, putting them, reaching the arms overhead, and then just having one arm go forward and one arm go back.
Nice.
Right? And just stabilizing against that. Very simple, really easy. Most of them can do it. Their arms get tired, but they also feel that core is working and stabilizing against that load, and playing with a bunch of different things in that area. And I found that was a really nice way to get that, again, sort of intrinsic core work, right? As opposed to crunches or extension work or whatever like that. It's just get the core to work against these unstable or uneven or asymmetrical loads.
Yep. A great exercise, and we'll post this on the Instagram page so people can see it, is I'll take a tube or a band and I'll hook it to a post or something, and I'll walk out sideways so it's 90 degrees to my body. I'll extend my arm straight. So I've created a lot of lateral torque. It's wanting to twist me toward the anchor point. And then I can do things with my arms. I can draw the alphabet. I can have them step out to the right. I can have them step to the left. I can have them take their arms overhead. So now I'm getting that lateral flexion as well. And it's in motion. So all of these things are challenging my core in various ways that is strengthening it, and in ways that, is very functional. It's going to transfer into function a lot better than a crunch necessarily would for some people.
Right. You could also do it like, I'm thinking, like you can even just hold that steady and do a squat.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I mean, you could even just like stabilize the torso against just the legs moving or lunges or whatever like that. Fabulous.
Yep.
Right. And again, clients feel that a lot. I find a lot of my clients that are kind of not very sensitive to their physical sensations, they can feel those, and they love it because they can feel it. It's like, oh yeah, God, I'm working so hard to hold this.
Yep.
And those are really nice ways. And again, totally functional.
Yeah. Let's talk cardiovascular. Okay.
Yeah.
They need to do some cardio work. Okay. First of all, we want to think about low impact activities, because you want to be sensitive to their knees, especially someone who's over the age of 40 or 50 who may have been overweight most of their life. Their knees, hips, ankles are probably going to have more wear and tear on them than someone who is of, smaller stature. So I want to preserve as much of that tissue as possible so that I don't want to have them race towards a knee replacement.
Right.
Be gentle on the joints. So I avoid high impact. Start gradual, small. Be aware of the recumbent bike. They all want to gravitate toward this machine, but if you do have a big belly, it may be something that's a little uncomfortable for them, because they're going to have to dodge that as their legs come in. So just be aware of that. Any recumbent stepper, recumbent elliptical, all of those may have the same issue. I often will start them on the elliptical or walking, especially walking, because it's something they already do.
Yeah. Walking is great. I've also had some that have done a lot of swimming.
Yes.
And one thing I want to say about swimming is great in some ways and in some ways not. So I just want to bring both those sides up. On the one hand, it is relatively low impact. So, water aerobics class is fantastic. You get some strength building, you get some joint stability potentially, depending how your instructor is putting it together, but you don't get the joint impact.
Yep.
On the other hand, and this is just something that is true about swimmers, if you ever look at swimmers, you will notice, even with high-level swimmers, that they are not necessarily ripped muscularly, because being in water actually tells your body to retain fat for insulation. And there's been a lot of studies that show that really, trying to reduce body fat through swimming is not very effective.
Yeah.
because your body's going like, I'm cold, I got to hold on to this body fat to stay warm.
Yep. Yep. There have been some studies on the amount of white versus brown fat that is developed by people like a Michael Phelps, people who spend 5-6 hours in the water every day, you know, how their bodies do hold on and create more fat. And if it's creating brown fat, that's one thing because that's highly metabolic. But if it's not, if it's creating, you know, more of the general adipose tissue, then you're not going to get the look necessarily that you know, may want. So that's just something, you know, to think about. Also, when we're talking about water, whether it be water aerobics or water or anything else, is we don't live in water. So don't make that your only form of exercise. Which
Right, you need gravity.
You need gravity as well.
Going through it. Yeah, absolutely. So walking and that, or, you know, whatever version of cycling or stepping or elliptical. I mean, the treadmills are really nice for that too, because you can walk, but you can add, and then you can control your walking environment different than you can when you're outside. Yep.
One thing I want to say, we've covered a lot of things, and one thing I want to mention here before we wrap things up is nutrition. Okay. My minor was technically nutrition. I studied a lot because it was something I was very interested in. But you know what? I'm not a dietitian. I'm not a nutritionist. If that's not you, if you're not a dietitian, if you're not a nutritionist, be wary of what we can say. Okay? Because creating diet programs and things like that, you're going against the scope of practice a little bit of what we do. So there are a lot of programs, and I could name them here, I'm not going to, but there are a lot of programs that say, oh no, you can do that, you're allowed to do that. And it's a gray area in fitness, kind of like using those, you know, devices for massage and all that kind of stuff. It's a gray area. For me, there are professionals out there who are specialists in this. And they also will have a greater understanding of what's going on metabolically. Hopefully they understand more about the medications the person's taking. And they are licensed oftentimes by the state. So you know what? I'm going to refer to them. That's who I want to do it.
Amen. And the other thing too is it's not only not your scope of practice, but you know, a real dietitian is going to look at your, let's say you're doing a diet app, right there, and you're tracking your eating or whatever you're doing, right? They're going to look at that and they're going to try to give you advice based on that. That is really, it's not only not your job. I'm going to be a little stronger, I think, even than Brian was on this. The number of, I'm going to be blunter, the number of stupid things I've heard come out of trainers and Pilates teachers' mouths regarding nutrition is unbelievable. You know, somebody has started some crazy diet thing, whatever it is for them, and they're like, and then everybody should try it. So you all have to go on keto, or you all have to go on paleo, or you all have to go do something. And it's like, that is just not, that just don't. I'm sorry, just don't. I had some really great people that I referred to that I would work with, nutritionists and dietitians and things like that. And we had this great relationship. You know, they'd come and they'd do exercise with me, and I'd say, "How's it going with Alice?" They'd say, "It's great. I'm changing this and that." And I would just listen, like, "That's fabulous. Whatever, is that working for you?" Like, "Yeah, it's really helping me to understand what I'm eating, what I'm doing, what I could do better." It's like, "Great. You do that." So I'm with Brian on that one. You just have to be really super cautious. It's so easy to go so wrong on that on so many levels.
I tell people what we're allowed to say are generalities, like drink more water.
Right.
You know, eat breakfast. Watch your alcohol intake. You know, things that are...
You may want to cut back on 27, energy drinks a day. Like, maybe not such a good idea. You know, little things that are kind of
small things. Exactly. You know, don't drink whatever. Those are the things that we are allowed to say. However, and I'll be the first to say I was hired as I think I was called a nutrition tech by a gym. And it was my job to do, according to their computer program, I had to do meal planning with people. And even as I was doing it, I was brand new in the industry. So I was thinking, yay, this is so cool and everything. The more I started learning, I realized, wow, this is really going beyond what I know. I'm a college student. I'm just a college student. And yes, I know a lot about nutrition, more than the average bear, granted. But I'm still a college student. So I'm still learning. There are people out there who know a whole lot more than me. And when in doubt, always refer out. So like you, I have people that I will send clients to. which is why I'm hooked up with the National Center for Weight and Wellness. We have psychologists, we have nutritionists, we have physicians. You know what? I handle the exercise. That's my gig. I'm really good at that. I can handle that.
Exactly. That's my scope, and I'm good at that one. I'm going to stick in my lane.
Too many trainers, and I think Pilates instructors are the same, become jack of all trades. They want to do everything for the client because we care so much. We want to help. But always remember, just because something works on your body doesn't mean it's going to work on theirs.
No. Mm-mm. No, I was talking to a good friend of mine who is a Pilates teacher and a physical therapist and a serious workout person. I mean, this is like her physical health has been something she's worked on a long time. And somebody said, oh, you should go on keto. And she went on a basically high fat, high protein diet. And it turned out her body didn't deal with fat, like metabolism very well at all. So she gained like 15 pounds in like a month. And she's like, what? Everybody else is losing weight. Why am I gaining weight? And then she, of course, went to dig a little deeper, went and had some blood work done. They said, oh, you don't metabolize fat well, period. Like you should never be on keto because that's not going to be appropriate for you. But you don't know that. And, that's not your job to know that, but go to somebody who does.
I had a friend who was a strength and conditioning coach, and he had a number of athletes. And he said, look, everybody is completely different. He was a nutritionist as well. So, and he did work with each one individually. He found that one was an Inuit. His bloodline was from the North. And we're talking about North Pole. The guy went back. He went back to the North Pole for a period of time and came back and was ripped. And 90% of his diet, 80% of his diet was fat.
Yeah.
His body worked well on that. It didn't work well on carbs. Whereas another teammate did not work well on fats at all. Whereas he was on a high carbohydrate, moderate protein diet, low fat diet. He got ripped to shreds and strong as an ox.
Right.
Everybody's body is different and we can't generalize.
No.
So that's something just to keep in mind. We can't generalize. So again, send them to a nutritionist, send them to someone who understands this stuff a little better than we do. And, stay with what we do best,
Exactly.
Stay with what we do best.
Stay in your lane and do it well.
Well, I hope you guys, this opened your eyes a little bit to what it takes to work with someone who may be larger, who may be obese, whether it be the super obese or someone who just has 20 or 30 pounds to lose, and maybe clue you in a little bit on how to keep them safe, how to progress them a little bit. The thing I'm going to reiterate is start small goals. For them, even doing 30 minutes of cardiovascular work 3 times a week may be really, really challenging. So start small, but also make it achievable so that they're going to feel like a success.
Success. Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's so important. If they feel success and their body starts to change, it's just going to invigorate them more and get them more motivated. And suddenly you're going to have a demon on your hands. They'll be like, I'm ready. I'm doing great. I love this. My clothes are fitting better. I've lost 5 pounds in the last 3-4 weeks. This feels great. That's what we want. We want them to have sustained success and to feel good about themselves and not feel like they're doing something that's so hard that they can't do it, that they feel like a failure.
Right. It's an 80% rule, right? Like they say, the people that stick with any kind of diet or habit or exercise or anything work at 80%. They don't work at 100.
Yep.
They work at about 80%. So that's sustainable, like something they can do and not die and not feel like they hate it. Like you've got to keep that level going, that moderate level going.
Yep. Quick story. When I work with clients down at the center, some people will come in and they're so motivated. This time of year especially, they are so motivated. They're like, I'm going to work out 6 days a week and I'm going to do it for an hour and a half a session. And I say, okay, cool your jets. Cool your jets, okay? Let's start out with 20 to 30 minutes 3 times a week. And they're like, but I say, hang on. If you're losing weight and having success at 3 times a week for 30 minutes, eventually you're going to plateau. And when you do, we have somewhere to go. We can add another day.
Yeah.
We can add another, there's somewhere for us to go. If you're working out 6 days a week for 2 hours.
We haven't maxed you already.
And someone came in and said, that's what they want to do. And I said, okay, fine. In a month when you plateau, what are you going to do now? 8 days a week, sorry, can't do that. 5 hours a day, no. There was nowhere to go. And people who started small that were seeing success and be like, yeah, and I can do this. And then I'll say, great. Do you think you can add another 10 minutes? Yeah, I think I can. All right. Let's go to 40 minutes. Let's go to 45 minutes. Let's add another day. And then we can build up, and suddenly they're doing more exercise. They're feeling even better. They're having more success. It's somewhere that we can ramp up. And I think that's just as important for them to see that they don't have to kill themselves at the begining, and they're going to be successful.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's just, I mean, we know this, sustainability. They've got to be able to do this where if you're trying to lose 100 pounds, it is not going to happen this week or this month or possibly this year.
Yep.
So, and if you're going to do it through diet and exercise, that does take a lot of work if it's going to work.
Yeah. Anything takes time. Is key. This is going to take time, whether you do it with weight loss drugs, bariatric surgery, diet and exercise, combination of all, whatever. Mm-hmm. It still takes time. Nothing is that quick fix. Okay, just because you saw it on TV on a television program that forced these people to exercise 8 hours a day and barely fed them and called a cup of coffee a meal, okay, that's not realistic. That's TV land. Reality, let's stay within that. Stay within a little reality here.
Let's keep it real, Brian. Shall we keep it real?
Yeah, a little bit. Oh, well, thank you guys for joining us for the last hour. We talked about working with overweight and obese clients. Hopefully you guys learned a lot. Hopefully this will spark some thought. And if you have any questions or whatnot, or have a topic that you would like to have us talk about, do us a favor, reach out to us. movingcombos@gmail.com. We're also on Instagram. And like I said, I'm going to post a video of some of those exercises so you can see what I'm talking about in case we weren't visual enough. And yeah, movingcombos@gmail.com is the best way to get in touch with us, or movingcombos at Instagram or Twitter.
Awesome.
All right. So we'll see you guys next week.